I hope you've had an opportunity to look at an animal and sketch it in order to become familiar with what kind of shapes and forms you're going to use to create this animal out of clay. I'm going to create my little fawn, so I'd like to show you an easy way to get started with most animals that have 4 legs, similar to the fawn. So let's get started. An easy way to begin making an animal out of clay is simply to pinch pieces of clay that can act as different body parts. So I'm using my pinching fingers to pinch a head and 4 legs. Right now, I'm not worried about size or position. I'm really just kind of getting started. This does not look like an animal yet. It's just a blob of clay, but it's a great place to start. Now I'm going to continue to pinch and try to think about proportions. For example, the legs are long and skinny, so I'm going to pinch and shape those legs so that they're nice and long and skinny. I've got the general shape of the legs correct. Now I'm going to think about the neck. So I notice I need to kind of pull it forward, bend the neck up, then pinch the head and snout. While you're working, you really need to compare your work to the photograph and see what parts are accurate and what parts need work. For example, I noticed the back of the body is really rounded, whereas mine looks kind of caved in. So you'll have access to more clay. I might grab a little piece of clay and simply just place it where it needs to go, and then smooth that clay onto the shape of the body. So this really involves a lot of analyzing what you've done and seeing what you can do to replicate or mimic the picture. Now that I think I've got the backside looking the right size, I'm going to bend the legs to mimic that curve, bend it back and down. Same with the one in the back. Bend it back and down. There we go. You'll notice I'm also smoothing the clay with my fingers. Right now my clay is pretty lumpy. I can use my fingers and get a little bit of water. Use that water to smooth out the bumps so we have a nice, smooth piece of artwork. I was working on the fawn's leg, and as I was making it skinny, it looks like the front leg got too long. So if it's too long, a simple solution is just to pinch part of the leg off. And that's a simple way to get rid of clay, especially in terms of the legs. Now maybe I pinched off too much. So if you pinch off too much, you can always re-add clay. Like I just pinched off a little bit. I'll attach it and then just smooth that clay back onto the bottom of the foot so that I can make it the right length. It's time for the face, and I really love adding the facial features. You could draw eyes on with a tool like this, but I always think it looks a little bit nicer to attach a piece of clay for the eye. So make a small ball of clay and flatten it out. I notice my eye looks kind of, or my fawn's eye looks kind of like a football shape. So I'm going to squeeze it to that size and test it out. I like that. And then I need to think about the ear too. So I'll get another piece of clay. Look at how big these ears are. So I'm just using my fingers and kind of pinching it to make it look like the shape of that ear. Now, when you attach something to clay, it's a good idea to use a toothbrush. And I'm gonna get my toothbrush wet with water. I'm gonna scratch where I want to attach the ear, and I'm also gonna scratch the area where it's going to attach. So I scratched in 2 places. The wet toothbrush gets the clay wet, which makes it a little bit sticky. And then the scratch marks that were created by the toothbrush, they kind of cling together from the two pieces of clay, and it makes it attach a little bit better. So I'm scratching, and attaching. The last step is to really just make sure it's attached well. I could even try to rub some clay from the side of the eye to the face in order to make sure that it doesn't come off. If I wanted to add any details, I could. Maybe I'll draw a little line here. Ooh, I think that looks great. Of course, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. I'm also smoothing and shaping. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. I finished sculpting my fawn, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I really took my time and tried to copy the forms that I see in the photograph. The last thing I want to do is try to make it stand up. So I've noticed that my legs are skinny. The legs that I created for the fawn are very skinny, and they're not strong enough to hold the weight of the body and the head and the neck. So what I've done is I've gotten a scrap piece of paper, one of the mixing papers, and I've crumpled it into a ball. I'm going to fit that piece of paper in between the legs, and I'm going to adjust it so that most of the weight of my sculpture is sitting on the paper, but the feet have to be touching the ground as well. That way, my sculpture will harden in this position, and once it's hardened, it will be able to stand up on its own. So right now, the paper is doing most of the work holding the sculpture up, but once this clay hardens, it will be solid and the legs will be able to hold the weight. Then we can put the clay in the kiln and it will be able to stand up from now on. So that's how we're going to end class. Today we're going to put our artwork on our name tag, which will be up in the front counter. And then we can wash our hands in the bucket of water in the sink and clean up our space. I can't wait to see what you create.